Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Monday, August 2nd, 2021. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here?
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Cummings, Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no public comment tonight, so we'll go right to the omnibus agenda items that will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Ms. Smith?
Yes, I'd like to pull items F and G and item I.
Ms. Lorenz?
I would like to pull item J, please.
Mr. North?
I'd like to pull items C, E, and H.
That's C, D, and H, correct?
C, E as in Edward.
C, Edward, and H. Motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Items on the omnibus are approval of the minutes of the special council meeting of July 19th, 2021, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 19th, 2021. The report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of July 28th, 2021. A resolution authorizing frame rail replacement and corrosion repairs to a 2011 Pierce fire engine. And please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
and Mayor Coos.
Aye. Those omnibus items are approved. Item C is a resolution to waive the formal bid process and accept a quote from EFI Solutions for the purchase of a new booster station. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. The reason that I pulled this is just the quote for the hardware. It does not include the installation cost. So we don't know what it's going to cost once we get this item.
My concern is later in the agenda, we've got other construction projects that are pulled because, or that we're being requested to reject the bids because the costs have come in 50% higher, 50 or 60% higher. This one, we're buying the hardware without knowing the install costs. And there was an option in the write-up where we could go with the existing structure type or the above-ground structure type. So I just don't feel that we've got all the information to know what the total cost is. Once we buy the hardware, we don't really have a choice when it comes back to council to ask us authorization for the labor part. And that's my concern. Is there a reason why we have to approve this tonight without getting an estimate for the cost to install?
Sure, Mr. Nords. As we mentioned in the report, there is a 14 to 20 week delay on the piece of equipment we're asking council to authorize tonight. Not delay, I was just saying a delivery timeframe of 14 to 20 weeks. I will ask Mr. Burkhart to come forward and explain what we know through experience regarding installation and what we know from other entities. Mr. Burkhart?
Yes, thank you. The major cost increases that we've seen is in the actual supplies. The labor itself has been fairly flat. We're not seeing huge price increases on labor on any of the projects we bid. It's the materials. So we're trying to get this thing ordered now before there's more price increases. And any of the remaining materials that are needed for connections are very minor in the scope of work. I believe Farnsworth Group has an estimate of about $150,000 for installs. So the install and the purchase price of the booster station should leave it well under budget.
Okay, I'm still a little skeptical that we don't see any increase in the price of labor for projects that are coming before us. To be honest, I didn't really look at the labor for the Camelback Bridge, so as we go forward, I'm going to look and see if that is 50% higher because of labor or materials too. So that surprises me. Just in the future, any project that comes before us, I'd like some sort of updated estimates, especially now that COVID's here, because costs are skyrocketing all over the place. So we have a better handle on what the total cost is. Not, hey, we're going to buy the hardware, worry about what it's going to cost later.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mr. Burkhart answered one of my questions already. The information in the packet talks about the urgency that you indicated that with the escalating prices that and the bid expires in 30 days or less to lock that pricing in, and they're pretty clear in their letter to us that they can't guarantee the pricing beyond that. So I appreciate the urgency and your willingness to try to save the town money there. I also got from the packet information that this structure's in pretty awful shape and that there's an urgency to get this done. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
So it's, partially about the materials cost and getting the best bang for the taxpayer buck, but it's also about making sure that we have a booster station that's actually going to work and help support the system without a delay in service. Is that what I understood?
That's an accurate statement, yeah.
Okay. So labor being what it is, I appreciate your efforts to try to save the taxpayers money by locking in some favorable pricing now. Thank you.
I'll echo that, Mr. McCarthy. In my business, it's crucial that when product comes available or the ability to order it, that we do it, because we do see price increases, and to lock in a price is in the long term is the smart play. Ms. Smith.
Yes, in my queries about this item on the agenda, one of the things that's pointed out is that what we're authorizing is the purchase of a prefab construction for the structure that will go above ground. If someone says hardware to me, I think about computers. So that's where the largest part of the materials will be involved in this booster station. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. It will be the actual building structure, the pumps, the piping inside, the controls, the valves. They will essentially offload this off of a trailer, set it on the ground, and then it will get hooked into the piping that we'll bid later that the contractor will complete.
And the vendor that you're using for this second booster station has already supplied some materials already in use in the water service, correct?
Yes, this would be the third booster station that we've purchased from this company.
So it will give us some economies of scale in terms of consistency of parts and replacement and working with the same vendor, correct?
Yes.
And I also noticed in the materials that they're offering a 2% discount if the town pays within 20 days. Is the town in a position to do that, to take advantage of that discount?
I guess I would defer to Ms. Reese or Mr. Day. That's not an option that we looked at pursuing. We just felt giving the vendor all of the money up front. We're confident that they will deliver the product that is provided in that proposal. But it's a little bit harder if there are some issues that happen later to, possibly get some work out of them. Versus that, I believe it's a $10,000 savings roughly. We just felt that it was probably worth it to hold on to that $10,000 just to ensure that we do get exactly what we are ordering.
So that would be a leverage decision.
Yes, but I guess if council chose to enact that option, that's, I guess, where I'd look for advice from Ms. Reese or Mr. Day on how you guys pursue that.
And if I'm reading the packet correctly, there's also a plan to solicit competitive bids when it comes time to identify who will install the finished prefab piece.
Yes. Within a month or so, we will bid the installation part of it so that we know who that contractor is going to be when this is delivered.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lorenz?
Thank you. To the point about breaking this into two, purchasing the materials now and obligating the funds for labor later, I'm not terribly concerned, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question anyway, because what I saw in the packet is that you cited a number of like $353,000 to complete the project would be available even after the purchase of the materials, that you've got a balance of about $350,000. And I just want to hear from you, do you expect that to be adequate to cover labor?
Yes, we would agree with the estimate that Farnsworth has of in that ballpark of 150,000.
Okay, so more than adequate.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't really think that there is grounds for big concern that we're breaking this up over two, and I actually think that you are taking advantage of some of the supply chain issues and trying to do the best you can to mitigate them. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
And Mayor Kus?
Aye, the resolution is approved. Item E is a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing the purchase of a Ford Horton Type 1 ambulance from Foster Coach Sales of Sterling, Illinois, in the amount of $229,339. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
Within the purchase of this, a resident contacted me. They got into the details of it and saw that for $4,000, there's a factory tour for two personnel. What is the point of that tour? Is there a decision that has to be made at that point that they have to go to be on site?
I believe it's standard practice, but I'll ask Chief Humer to come forward. I believe it's standard practice, Mr. Nord, for town staff to go to the manufacturing facility when our fire apparatus is being constructed to inspect it. Then we also tend to bring one of our mechanics and one of the fire department, one or more of the fire department personnel to make sure it's being constructed as expected. So I'll ask Chief Humer to expound.
And also, when you do, Chief, this is a location, Sterling, Illinois, which is like an hour and a half north of
No,
Peoria?
we would be going to the factory to look at it. It's a inspection prior to taking ownership to it. So basically, you would go there with the sales representative and meet with the people and the engineers from the factory and go over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that everything that you have specified is the way it should be. I would bring up the time when I was assistant chief, when I was first hired here. We flew to Florida to do a final inspection on the ambulance, and when we arrived, it was the wrong color. It was orange, not red and black. And so these are the types of things that we're obviously looking for. Make sure it has the right chassis, the right motor, what kind of air conditioning, what kind of controls, the setup of the back action area, the cabinetry, all those things. Those are the things that we're looking at on ambulance. And obviously fire trucks are at a much larger scale to look at those. And those are built into the price. I mean, they charge for that. I mean, but that's just how it's done in the ambulance and fire business.
Okay, yeah, because it said on the paperwork, I want to say it said Sterling, Illinois, so that threw things off.
Yeah, that's where the company is located. It's an Illinois company, but the factory is actually located out of state.
Okay, well, it makes sense that it's for critical decisions like that to be made, not just a tour. So thank you for answering that question.
Sure, absolutely.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the resolution is approved. Item F is an ordinance authorizing the town of Normal to enter into a state and municipal lease purchase agreement with Clayton Holdings LLC as leaseor and not to exceed $1,133,140 and approve an applicable budget adjustment.
So
Ms.
moved.
Smith, thank you. Do I have a
Second.
second? Thank you. Ms. Smith?
I guess you're back on the hot seat.
Well, I think Mr. Hune might be a little better.
He is actually the individual I wish to speak with.
Okay.
So, Mr. Yoon, I understand this is the first time the town is pursuing a lease as opposed to an outright purchase. Could you explain the process that you undertook to solicit quotes from the various parties that bid on this?
Sure. We reached out to all the local banks. The ones listed in the council report are the ones that responded back. I think the one that we reached out to didn't respond back was PNC. We've worked with these banks in the past on different items. Commerce originally did a bond refunding for us some time ago, you might recall that. Essentially, we sent out an email from my office to all the contacts we have for those banks describing the terms we were looking for. We wanted a 10-year term. We asked for prepayment penalties, any fees, what they need in terms of bond counsel. So we kind of gave them all very specific information that we wanted in terms of information back. And all those firms came back, all those bids came back with those offers. We did ask for closing dates within July and August to give us time to react to the market and to react to any questions or if we had at that point in time.
And although the one bank quoted you a lower percentage rate, they incorporated some upfront fees that when you then calculated it out, the financing costs made that loan higher, correct?
That's correct. Busey had actually the lowest rate for the interest, but they had an upfront fee that was sizable that essentially made their total cost of borrowing, which would be, basically the interest cost for the term of the agreement, any closing costs, any bond counsel costs. That added up to be far more expensive than it was from Commerce.
So unlike a private citizen who might get a car loan, there was no down payment required on this lease arrangement. They're simply offering us the full price for the truck and then allowing us to spread the payments over 10 years?
That's correct. No down payment. In fact, our first payment isn't due till a year from now, for if we approve this tonight. And then 9 more years after that, we'll pay it off. And then at our final lease payment, it's really a financing. They call it a lease, but it's really a financing. It's leased because they essentially own the title of the property until we make our final lease payment, and then we take title of it on the 10th year.
Okay. And the reason this is 2 separate agenda items is that unless we approve the lease, we will not move forward with the item G on the agenda.
Well, I'll jump into that one. We did put these in strategic order, asking council to approve the financing first. If council chose not to finance through this process, we still would ask you to authorize the purchase of the fire truck and your next agenda item, but we would then just pay cash.
Okay. And one of the advantages of not paying cash at this time is, in your long-range forecast, how is that becoming advantageous for the town to pursue that at this time?
Sure. It's the staff's opinion that we want to hold on to cash when we can and when rates are favorable. We certainly could pay cash for this purchase, but in terms of looking at the long-term outlook, which is improving from COVID, the budget process we were in just last year, we had an outlook that looked a little challenging for the out years. That is likely going to improve in our next budget process. However, we're not 100% certain of that. And in this case, the rates are actually below what we would earn on our $1 million anyways. So really it's a very favorable position to go ahead and finance this, because if we gave up the cash immediately, we'd lose interest rates on that right away, and interest rates are actually above the interest that we pay in terms of the cash, the loan or the leasing financing. So given the low rates, given some remaining uncertainty of the outlook, although the town's in a very strong position right now, we're always concerned about the outlook in the out years. So we felt it'd be more advantageous to keep the $1.1 million in our bank account and essentially use Commerce's money at a very favorable rate over the next 10 years to make that purchase.
And it is a fixed rate.
Correct.
Thank you.
Further, Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, that last point is the one that really struck home with me when I was looking at this, is the case that is being made about best use of money if we're only paying 1.45 in interest, but our interest earnings on the flip side, if we keep that cash per this item, are expected to exceed that. It actually ends up becoming a really easy case to make financially. This may be more relevant to the next item, but it's pertinent in the standpoint of what we're talking about here. The expected lifespan of the apparatus, what is that and how does that look like? Should it be a piece of equipment we don't want to keep for the full 10 years? I assume we would just pay off the remainder of the note at the time we would trade it in or not utilize it anymore. Is that right?
Sure. Well, actually, the decision to finance over a 10-year period was fairly strategic. The least useful life of a fire truck is 15 to 20 years, typically. We're going to pay it off in 10, so we're way below we're way before the useful life ends up. And in fact, after 10 years, we'll still have a fairly valuable asset on our hands. From what I hear from the fire personnel, and what even Commerce was suggesting, what we see in the market, we'd have a pretty, several $100,000 of value in that truck still. So the plan is essentially we'll do the financing for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, we'll look at the vehicle. There'll be new technologies available in terms of new trucks. We could sell this truck outright to somebody and then lease a new truck going forward for 10 more period. So that gives us quite a few options. It spreads the cash flow. It makes sense from the rates perspective. And it gives us a planning tool. At the end of 10 years, we can look at the vehicle, the apparatus, and either keep it for several more years, depending on where technologies are for such vehicles, or sell it and then do another lease financing or purchase. So we want to keep our options open, and that's part of the process in terms of that 10-year note.
Thanks.
Mr. Nord?
I can appreciate considering borrowing money if it's going to cost less to borrow it than to use your own if you're going to be making more interest. But the money that the town has, aren't we planning on using that? It's not like we're going to keep that in the bank and earn interest during that whole period. You know, we've got the underpass coming up, which the town needs money. So, you know, I'm not confident that we're going to leave the money in the bank and earn more interest than what the bank is going to charge us. Also, when we took the money from our residents, you know, and taxed them, we put it into this account and we told them it was to fund purchasing a fire truck, a vehicle. It was the vehicle and equipment fund. So we took that money for them, and for the past however many number of years that that's been accumulating, that's been the story. Now when it's time to use it, we're doing, you know, a bait and switch. We're going to use it for something else. You know, we're going to rob Peter to pay for Paul, but, you know, Peter has to take a loan for us to even be able to rob from him. So I think that that's dishonest. It's not what we've been told through the budget sessions that we've had, because I've asked about the vehicle equipment fund many a times. And, you know, as far as our financial situation, even later in this council meeting, it says that we set aside $4 million to support paying down debt next year. You know, so we've got that money available to pay down debt. If we take on more debt now, you know, we're just taking on more debt. We're not even using the money that, we're just not being consistent. And it seems like the town is now going into this credit card mentality where we know we need to accumulate cash because we've got this big, huge expense coming up. And this is the first item that this is kind of really sticking out, to me anyway. And I don't think that that's being truthful to the people that we took their money. You know, it's like telling people we're going to increase the gas tax to pay for roads and then not use it for that. So that's kind of my stance on this. I'm comfortable with buying a fire truck, but not with financing it, because that has not been the plan as we've been accumulating the money from our residents.
Can I react to that?
Well, I will first. You know, it doesn't feel good to be accused of being dishonest, bait and switch and everything else. Just as a side note, we got another notification of a Excellence in Financial Reporting, GFOA award today. And we're very proud of our budget and very proud of the public conversations we always have about our budget. Staff is certainly recommending this because we believe it makes financial sense for the organization and ultimately the taxpayers. If council disagrees, that's absolutely fine and we'll pay cash. Nothing dishonest or bait and switch or unethical about the recommendation. So just wanted to put that out there that we have talked about the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund. We have always talked about our financial management strategies, and council generally has supported that. In fact, we will be coming back to you next month with our financial trends reporting and be very open and honest about all of our financial funds, all of our fund balances, what we see on the horizon and what our history has been. And we'll continue to have those conversations in public like we always do. So I just, you know, if council doesn't support this, that's absolutely okay. That's exactly why the next agenda item is to authorize the acquisition, cash or financing, either way. So if council's not comfortable with this, and if you know, there is concerns about staff or elected officials being dishonest about our vehicle and equipment replacement fund, and we should certainly discuss that, but maybe for another time.
I would add to that too, Mr. Nord, if you think there's dishonest activity or baiting and switching, you should look at me and your fellow council members, because at the end of the day, we're making that decision, not staff. This is not a staff decision, this is a council decision. Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess a couple things stand out to me about this one. First is 1.45, wow. If there was anything criminal, it's the interest rates for financing vehicles that I paid when I was in my 20s compared to what we're getting on this. That's amazing. Kudos to you guys for going to the market and being able to use taxpayer dollars to get more than we have to pay to get equipment. So there seems to be a whole bunch of assumptions and not so veiled innuendo in comments tonight. Just to be clear, the money in the vehicle and equipment fund will be used to purchase vehicles and equipment. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're not going to buy party favors out of vehicle and equipment fund for other people, right? We're using it to buy vehicle and equipment?
Correct.
Okay.
It's probably important to note that any recommendation that staff makes with this kind of thing, it's all based on trying to bring the best value and efficiency to the taxpayer.
Exactly.
And the best value and efficiency of how we manage the money.
Right.
We could certainly stick with the plan and pay cash, and that would, but to be quite honest, that would probably be a disservice to the taxpayer. We change our plans when new information becomes available that says you should change your direction. Rates are extremely favorable.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we would not consider this as a valid recommendation. And as Ms. Reese mentioned, we simply are trying to find the best value for the taxpayer with information we have at hand. We certainly change our fiscal plan all the time. We're going to update the fiscal plan in a few months for the next 5 years, and then we'll do it again every single after that. So it's a constant fluid planning process that has to occur for us to be efficient and add value. And this certainly does add value to the taxpayer in our staff opinion.
Thank you, and I would agree. This harkens back to lease purchase decisions in finance school, and I'm glad you're doing those calcs and I don't have to anymore. But I think one thing that's you talked about, but kind of in a thin sideline way, is the opportunity cost of money as well. There's certainly the actual cost of money when you're doing those type of lease purchase decisions using cash or using financing. But somewhere in the packet we talked about, I think we have 3 ambulances that are coming up in the next few years that we have to purchase. And so tonight we're doing 1, and we got 2 more to do here in short order. So it seems to me like we need money in the vehicle and equipment. And so if we've got a good financing strategy that is a service to the taxpayer, let's take advantage of it so we can go ahead and get those other ones replaced too, because they're anywhere close to the price of this one. We're looking at $3 to $4 million in ambulances over the next couple of years. So we're going to need that money in vehicle and equipment. So I'm not concerned about this at all. Kudos to you guys for thinking outside the box and coming up with a different approach when the market conditions are favorable. I don't see a lease decision as criminal or in any way, and I appreciate you guys being creative. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you. I guess I'll start off with maybe I dreamt this, or maybe some of my council members have had amnesia, but I believe we've discussed before looking more at options to lease because of the possibilities of the financial position we could be in and the market. So I'm not sure why this seems to be something new. However, something else that kind of caught me that I think is also getting missed amidst all of this is you talked about the value of the vehicle at 10 versus waiting to end of life. And that actually gives us a little bit leverage as well, and also I think a tool, if you will, for us to then purchase another vehicle versus waiting to the end and you have something that possibly could maybe not have any value at all. And so I think that's something else to take consideration of beyond the fact of just, I don't want to belabor some of the other things, the 1.45% that we're looking at and what, overall what the cost could actually be more of a value to us in the long run. And, my colleague, Mr. McCarthy, already brought up the fact that we do have other vehicles. And I also want to also reiterate, all of this is still coming out of a specific fund that will not be used for anything else. It's just how we're managing those dollars are just a little different, and it's based off of what's going on. And for those who may not know, markets do change all the time, and I think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of where it is now, just like people are doing with the housing market, who are selling because it's a great time. Not necessarily is it, I met somebody today who said, I'm selling some of the houses I own because it's a great market. Didn't think I would. It's a great market. So it's about understanding what your possibilities are in this moment and what will put you in the best financial position. But if you could go back for me and just for also the audience, kind of clarify, I don't know if it would be you or Mr. Humer, to talk about if we did the lease at the 10 years and we decided to use it as this other financial leverage, the greater benefits of that versus waiting completely till end of life on a vehicle.
Sure, I can react to some of that. The longer you have a vehicle like that, the more maintenance costs increase also. So, and then at the end of the 15, 20-year lifespan, it's not worth very much. It may be worth something to some city or town out there, but it's not necessarily a market for that type of aged vehicle or aged apparatus. So again, we thought let's set our term at 10 years, and that might also be the useful life term we use going forward. It's hard to say because things will change, and we'll get to that year 10 and see how things look. But we will certainly have a valuable asset in 10 years that is completely paid for at favorable rates. To assess how to approach after that. Do we keep it for 10 more years? Do we sell it and then buy a new one? At that time, will we pay cash or we finance? Who knows? We'll look at the market at that. So it gives us a lot of options that we feel comfortable with. Does that address your question? Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, and then Ms. Cummings, and, I'm sorry, Ms. Lorenz, and then Mr. Nord. Ms. Smith.
I believe that Mr. Nord may be conflating the concept of donor-restricted funds in a charitable organization with government accounting, where the policy and how the budget is set is subject to the vote of this council, and dollars do not come in targeting specific funds. Dollars come in, and this council votes on the format of the budget and putting dollars into the equipment fund. So I fail to see how a bait and switch is involved in that process. And also, and when we're looking at it, although you hadn't mentioned it when I had asked, the town is currently earning an average of 1.6% over the last 5 years on their investments in securities for the cash that they keep in reserve, as is prudent. And so there's some arbitrage that we're getting right now with this low interest rate, and there are rumors of the Federal Reserve possibly raising interest rates, which, since we're going into a fixed term, would not impact our cost of money, but it could impact how we can gain investment income on the reserves that we have available. So again, I think this is a smart use of money, and it is providing us an opportunity to make money on the cash that we keep in reserve. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. I know we've got a long agenda tonight, and I hate to kind of belabor this, but I just have to call it out. Mr. Nord, there you go again. There you go again. Conflating, I think, was a word that's been used.
Point of order, this discussion should be about the merits, not about
I'll get to the
anything
merit,
else.
if I may.
Continue.
You threw out a couple of grenades and a couple of lightning rod topics that I think are just a recipe for misinformation that is really uncalled for. And I want to set the record straight here. And frankly, I know you're a businessman, so I know you understand financing. And I don't want us to just fall off the rails and succumb to fear-mongering. We all know what sense this makes. We're all taking our turns at saying what sense it makes. I just wanted to call out the fact that let's be smart here. Let's not throw out word salads just to stir the pot. Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Whether we purchase this equipment with cash or finance it, in 10 years, it's going to be worth the same dollar amount, right? That's got no bearing on the future value of this used equipment. or what will be used equipment, correct?
Correct. As I stated, it's really just a strategic notion to set a 10-year clock on the financing of this apparatus. It helps in our planning purposes, it helps in our debt management, it helps in our vehicle reserve equipment stuff. So
Sure.
that's why we did it.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. And this vehicle, we planned on purchasing this long ago. This isn't something that just came about here in the past few years. This was,
Correct. This is part of a scheduled plan to purchase the fire equipment.
okay. And part of that schedule was setting aside money so we could eventually pay cash for it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there was some conversation that had come up that we will not be taking money from the Vehicle and Equipment Fund for any purpose other than vehicles and equipment. Is that an accurate statement? Because what I recall is that we may be taking money from the Vehicle and Equipment Fund and moving it to the general fund for other purposes.
I'll answer that. That's a council decision, Mr.
Okay,
Nord.
so then that is up for change. That is not set in stone. So when we say that we will not, we can totally change that. Any decision that we have made before can completely change. So there's no guarantee that we won't. Then, also, something I wanted to read. This is in this packet for tonight. It said that the $8.9 million of essentially surplus that we had last year, $4 million of that was transferred to the town's debt sinking fund, and $4.9 million of that was transferred to the town vehicle
Point of order,
equipment
Mr.
replacement
Mayor.
fund.
Are we talking about a different agenda item during this
So-
agenda item?
So we have put
Point of
$4
order,
million. It
Are
is
we
for this
talking
because
about-
this is where the money's coming from.
He appears to be reading a different agenda item during this agenda item.
I'm just,
Point of order.
fine, I'm stating fact.
I'll accept that point of order.
All right, but I'm stating fact that, well, then answer the question, then, Mr. Hume. Did we take $4 million and move it to,
We have a point of order that's
The
been
debt sinking
upheld.
fund.
Mr. Nord, you're out of order.
I failed, well, then I would like to appeal this because I failed to see how a financial decision or a financial question doesn't relate to a financial
Is there
conversation.
further discussion on this item?
We've got $8 million, 4 we moved to the vehicle equipment fund, 4 we put towards debt sinking.
Nord,
So
you
we've
are
got
out
an
of
abundance of
order.
money. We don't need more money in that
Or
fund.
you are out of order.
All right, my last point, which relates to this, I'm sure our residents would rather keep the money in their pocket.
You are out of order, Mr. Nord. 18 years I've never done that, but you are out of order. Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the audience and anybody watching at home, I think my colleague, Ms. Smith, accurately addressed this, that conflating enterprise funds or fund-restricted funds in the town of Normal is not what the Vehicle and Equipment Reserve Fund is. Money moves in and out of this fund to fund different things all of the time. So there isn't any restriction, and I was misquoted by Mr. Nord. I simply asked a question that said, do we use funds in the Vehicle and Equipment Fund to purchase vehicles and equipment? I didn't say that they were never used for any other purpose or things don't move in and out of the fund, because that would not be a true statement. So,
Mr. McCarthy, I'm going to ask you to wrap this up.
Thanks.
We're kind of getting circular
Yep,
here, and I think we know that it's time to call a vote on this.
Absolutely. Go right ahead, Mayor. Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item G is a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing the purchase of a Spartan Smeal Ladder fire apparatus from Fire Apparatus Supply Team of Lincoln, Illinois, at a cost of $1,133,140.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
I think I have no questions on the apparatus itself, so I'm satisfied to move to the vote.
Further discussion on this item? Ms. No? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item H is a motion to reject bids for the Camelback Bridge repair and painting project. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. For this one, I pulled it because we are being asked to reject the bid because of the cost, because the costs have gone up. I'd like to understand, was this materials or labor that caused the increase?
Mr. Nord, I'll turn around and see if I can find Mr. Otto.
Here,
There he
he's
is.
coming.
He'll explain the process of why we're asking council to reject bids in this instance, because
the bids, whether it's labor or material, is unclear. We can't tell that for sure from the bids. We do have a sense from the bid items and the costs that for instance, the handrail painting, which is essentially a handrail literally that goes up on the east and west sides of the Camelback, for the low bid was in the range of about $35,000. So we know that's not a reasonable bid, so we're not quite sure exactly why, but rejecting the bids will give us the opportunity to talk with the bidders at the appropriate time in the bidding process, and then we feel like we have a good opportunity to rebid the project in the spring with the redecking that we need to do. So we feel it's appropriate. I made the decision to split the project out originally, thinking we could get the painting done this fall and get some decent bids. That turned out not to be the case. So there could be some issues with timing, knowing that we're already in first part of August and your painting window is fairly narrow. So we just feel that with the cost, we feel that we'll get a better price if we reject and go back out in the spring. The structural engineer has assured us that that is not a safety issue. It's not a concern in terms of another 8 months wear on the metal surfaces. So we feel the rejection is the best case.
Okay, but to be clear, we don't know whether it's materials or labor?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith?
So, Mr. Otto, so until the bid is rejected, are then you precluded from having any conversations with the companies that have submitted bids?
I would defer to Mr. Day on that. I know that our standard practice is not to discuss with bidders prior to a decision by council on award or rejection.
I think that's a sufficient answer. We don't need to weigh
Okay.
in.
Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The item is approved. Item I is a resolution to accept the proposal for the completion of an uptown parking study from Desmond Design Management in Chicago, Illinois. Ms. Smith?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
So this parking study, if I'm reading your response to my questions after reading the packet, was originally authorized in March of 2020. So the council has been interested in pursuing the parking garage and surface parking for more than a year, correct?
that is correct. We incorporated this project in last fiscal year's budget because we believed it was time to take a good look, a third-party evaluation of our uptown parking situation, our parking deck operation, as well as surface lots and on-street parking, and to give us some recommendations on best practices and things that perhaps we can do better. The project was budgeted last fiscal year. Because we went into a pandemic, we tightened our belts. We wanted to be cautious about how we spent those dollars in our budget last year, so we held it back, and then we are coming forward now with that project.
And in the town expenditures, when there's a negative amount showed that the town is reimbursing the parking management company, is that net of revenues they've already collected, so the actual expense of the parking deck would be higher than those amounts reflect?
Ms.
I
Smith,
believe
I'm going
that's
to ask us to stay on topic, and the issue is approving a study.
Okay. Well, I just asked because if there is an interest in, as a result of the study, in providing free parking, there would be a requirement to offset that additional challenge to the budget, correct?
Again, I'm going to ask that we stick to the topic, and it's, those questions are valid questions, and we'll, I think at such time as the study's underway, would be the appropriate time to ask those.
Well, I hope this is on topic. Let me try again. So in the study, the consulting firm is asking to defer to the town to solicit feedback. And would you explain their rationale for the initial feedback? Would you explain what their rationale by outsourcing that back to the town?
Are you talking about the citizen engagement
Yes.
component of it? Yeah, to get citizen input and participation on the process and kind of the outcome. The study is going to involve citizen input.
And the study would not begin until the students are back in town, so we'd have their feedback as well?
That is correct. Illinois State students are moving back to start their semester in about a week or so, week and a half. And so they will be present when the study gets underway.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lorenz and then Mr. Nord.
I had a couple questions I think are pertinent. One is, do we know who the steering committee that they reference will be made up of?
I'll defer to Mr. Hanson, and he can get into those details.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, this one's easy. No, they do not, because you haven't approved the study yet.
Got it, okay. The online, and this may be something to Ms. Smith's point about the surveying, the online opinion survey that's in the report as an option, do you think we'll take that option, or are you?
I'm hopeful. I think we really hope to get as much feedback as possible from those who are using, but also those who may not use.
Yes, right.
Uptown parking options. I think that will provide us the best guidance from a study perspective.
Yes, I would like to just put my 2 cents in on that as well. I think that there's a lot to be heard from those who maybe do not use the parking, as well as those who do. Because I think there could be some perception. So as long as you're online there, that's good. I just make sure that they understand the difference. They wouldn't be the first one, won't be the last, the difference between Bloomington, Indiana and Bloomington, Illinois. I did notice a little typo in the report. So just
I'm sorry, I'd be remiss, given the number of errors that I make. I took a little bit of joy in pointing that out to the consultants.
make sure if they fly here that they go to Bloomington, Illinois and not Bloomington, Indiana. And lastly, in all seriousness, can you summarize why the other submissions were ruled out?
Yeah, so there were 5 submittals. 3 were pretty similar, I think, as the report stated, and then there were 2 proposals that were kind of outliers. So 3 of the proposals ranged from 56 to I think 67,000, and then there were 2 that were down around 25. And reading those proposals, not that they probably could do the study, but the proposals were certainly not as clear in terms of what the expected outcomes would be. Then the firm at the highest was above budget, so that was obviously a concern for the committee. And then firms 2 and 3, and all 3 at the top rated pretty similar. Firm 2, which was just a few $1,000s more than this particular proposal, all the other firms said they could do the study in roughly 90 days. That one said 9 months. It was definitely, there was a lot of engagement, but I think our hope was that we wouldn't be undertaking the study for 9 months. And so, all things considered, the committee felt like for the proposal, for the time frame, and obviously being within budget, that this was the best selection and the best option to complete the study.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. How many years out is the consultant being asked to make projections or recommendations?
Well, obviously, we haven't got into the details yet, right? Because they just submitted their proposal and we haven't even had a preliminary meeting. Certainly part of that initial focus with the steering committee. But typically these studies look out, easily 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so we've got some big changes coming up. The underpass. Some folks here talked about wanting to know what's going on in Uptown 2.0. The parking is going to be a huge factor in that. We haven't talked about what is going to happen on the other side of the tracks. So this study, I think, is premature, not having that information. They're not going to be able to incorporate this. And had we not had this big change, I don't know that we even considered this an issue. But that, I think, is a dramatic issue that has changed the parking study completely. And like I say, I think it's premature to enter into a parking study before we know what's happening south of the tracks. And anything that we want to do temporarily, if we're wrong, whatever we do, we've got a $60,000 leeway because that's what the consultant's fee is. So I think that's a decision that we can make together as a council with the help of the professional staff without bringing in consultants. So that's why I'm not in favor of this parking study at this time.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Hanson. I'm actually very enthused to see this hit our agenda. We've been talking about this for a while with more development on the north end, as my colleague pointed out on the south. I think we're overdue in terms of studying what's coming, what we know is coming, and what's our available inventory, and how closely are we to matching what we know is coming versus what we have in stock. Also, for those watching or here live or on camera at home, remember when we do a study like this, as Mr. Hanson pointed out, 5 to 10 years, we try to look forward. But that doesn't mean as soon as the study's over, we build everything on day one. Is that a master plan like that starts to get implemented over a number of years based on what actually happens, the type of development that happens, the type of progress that's being made, and gives us the opportunity to start to look forward and put things in place, money, infrastructure, assets in place over a number of years to implement a plan like this. The Uptown Master Plan happened over the course of 20 years so far, or a little over 20 years. And so for those watching, a study like this helps us to plan for the future, helps us to plan to make sure that we're ready for when that development happens. So I'm, for one, excited that this is finally on our agenda and enthusiastically support it.
Thank you. The thing I would, in response to that as well, obviously the largest asset or liability, depending on how you look at it, that we have that's not going to go away is the decks.
Yep.
And they are now anywhere from 12 to 15 years old.
Yep.
And ongoing management, ongoing investment, and ongoing utilization of those decks is irrespective of anything that happens to the other side of the tracks. And so from, I think, staff's perspective, when this was put in the budget more than a year ago, more than a year and a half ago, the underpass was not a foregone conclusion, and yet it was felt that this was a prudent investment and a prudent activity because we're kind of at that critical juncture. We need to make some decisions about how we utilize the decks going forward, and we're hopeful that this company can help us do that, as well as then how those fit in with our various street and surface lot parking.
Thank you.
Ms. Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor. It's funny because I had already had my hand up, but I think you were reading my mind. I don't know if this is amnesia night for our council or not, but you hit on everything that we as a council actually sat in a training session. I believe it was your first year when we talked about doing a study. I guess this is amnesia night for council, and for some reason I'm on the ball tonight because I remember this. That these were the reasons. However, I think it's very prudent upon us to say that we've been a very forward-thinking community, and I think that we would relay any future possibilities as well within the project. I believe we have very capable staff, very capable, when we hire people to do this, because we have staff who knows what they're doing and select the right firms and the right organizations to handle our business. I don't run with fear in these spaces. So we know this needs to be done, and the very thing that council said that still sticks out in my mind when we sat and we belabored over the fact that we needed this is the fact of the maintenance of those decks and the management and the cost that it has been to the town for the management. And so I think this is long overdue. I think this is time. And I think that as long as we keep the future also in the picture and in the view, we should have nothing to worry about. But thank you for reading my mind before I got to ask my question.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Nord.
No.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item J is a resolution authorizing the renewal of the Employee Group Health Dental Life AD&D Insurance Program. Ms. Lorenz?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Ms. Lorenz?
All right, thank you. On this item, this is where the request is for us to approve the renewal of the insurance program, group health, dental, life, and so forth, but with a 17% increase to premiums. And that's a cost that is cost shared between the employer, the town, and the employees. My concern with this, to be very, very blunt, is that this is too big of an increase. At budget time, it was anticipated that it would be in the neighborhood of 8%, and to come back with no discussion ahead of time, no forewarning that this is going to be more than double, is pretty close to unacceptable to me. And I think we really need to, my urging would be to go back to our consultant, I don't know what his right term is, the Horton Group, and sharpen the pencils, come back with alternatives.
Sure. I can certainly appreciate that position. That is, it is quite a large number in terms of a percentage increase. The Employee Insurance Committee has been working closely with the Horton Group and Mr. Wojcik, our broker, to react to the current situation. And in fact, we asked Mr. Wojcik to be here tonight to talk about the state of our health insurance program and why we had the experience we had. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Wojcik to come forward. He might have some information that might be useful. It's not going to do much to cushion the impact. I believe, based on some research, that our experience is not unique based on other insurance programs and kind of coming out of a pandemic year. But I'm going to defer to Mr. Wojcik, and I'm also going to ask Ms. Kier, our Human Resources Director, to come forward. She manages our group insurance program. And so if you give us just a quick moment, I know our city clerk is going to step aside. We're sharing microphones in order to try to spread out tonight, so thank you. Mr. Wojcik?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Sorry of the circumstances of which I'm here. And all very good points and well addressed. Just to give you some history of what we've gone through the past year and what has ultimately led up to this situation right now. Pandemic certainly has had its impact on everybody in different ways, every business. Certainly healthcare was no exception. What we saw and what was impacted in particular was predictability of healthcare. If people would get healthcare, when they would get healthcare, where and how. And last year, we saw just the opposite effect, a slowdown in healthcare when we compared this to the large claims that are on your plan, which impact your plan. We had 6 at this time last year. This year we have 12. What we saw is a rebound of people getting care from last year. Last year, people were not inclined to go to the doctor, the hospital, if they didn't have to. Elective services were put on hold. As a result, we had a favorable renewal last year. We had lower claims throughout all last year. This year was more of a rebound effect. People who have put off things came back. And some of the things that they put off were magnified. So people maybe bypassed some tests that they should have had last year. And as a result, have a much more serious situation they're dealing with this year. So right now, this year to date alone, our claims are about $1 million more than they were last year at the same time. And will this continue? That's the big question with the pandemic, is how much is out there? Did people come back and get things taken care of that they should have? So what we did in the process here, anticipating that this was not going to be an easy year, we hit the market hard. We went to roughly 20 different carriers, third-party administrators, reinsurance companies, quoted both fully insured and self-funded plans, every angle, every stone. Although Blue Cross was our current carrier and always a favorite, they shut down in many areas that we needed to progress in to help control our costs. So ultimately, we made a recommendation to move carriers, move administrators, shop things very independently, and that's the way we're going to probably have to do this going forward to get the best results, because we're going to see things, healthcare different in the future. No one carrier is going to have a solution for everything. This will be a culmination of what we call add-ons and pieces, such as, I think in your write-up you saw, we're recommending a new pharmaceutical benefit manager. We're restricted to using Blue Cross's PBM prior, without options that were going to save us money. Pharmacy is one of our largest expenses for the town. It accounts this past year for roughly 40% of your total healthcare spend. And some of the remedies that we are allowed under the current plan arrangement did not allow us to address those rising costs. And we expect those pharmacy costs to continue to go up unless we get some intervention more on a federal level. So a lot of the things we did to the plan still result in a very high renewal from a percentage standpoint, but we think we positioned you in a much better place to be going forward. Many more options that you could participate in and select that will end result produce a better result. We went with UMR, which is a division of United Healthcare. So we received the United Healthcare network and their discounts, which are comparable to what we had previously with Blue Cross. But what we picked up, Blue Cross wasn't even offering. Blue Cross, out of the 20 companies that we approached, 10 said no thanks. 8 quoted. 2 were TPAs, so they technically quoted also, but so 10. And of those 8, only 1 was competitive, and that's what we're recommending today. Even our current carrier was not competitive with what we needed to do to get you to a 16-month rate for to get to a January 1st renewal date, which was the desire of the town. And it makes total sense to do that. I'm happy to see you doing that. So we quite honestly exhausted the market. We have regional brokers. Health Alliance was at 100% increase. Certainly not competitive. All the other reinsurers that we had were much more expensive, and they did not give us the 16-month contract. You would have been putting the town at risk with some of the contracts that they were recommending out there. So we have what we feel is the most appropriate contract to meet your desire to get to January 1st, renewal dates. And again, a lot of flexibility for the future to address where healthcare is going. Number one on our radar scope is pharmacy. But as far as health, I know you're doing a lot of things as a plan, as a town, to help promote wellness and keep your employees healthy, and that's part of your health plan's purpose. Certainly to attract and retain good talent, but first of all, to keep people healthy. And I think you're in the best position with this recommendation. And quite honestly, we're certainly open to go back to anything, but knowing the process that your team went through, we went through, there's no stone that's left unturned.
Thank you, Mr. Wojcik. I do want to jump in, and you may have more questions, Ms. Lawrence. Certainly, 17% is much more than we had budgeted and expected. As Ms. Lawrence mentioned, we budgeted for an 8% increase. That is typical when we do our budget. We anticipate what we think is a conservative number, and based on last year's renewal at 3.8%, I think it was about 3.8%, we believed 8% was a good conservative number. We missed the mark on that budget. To put it in terms of dollars, we're talking percentages of 17% premium increase for the health fund. That equates to, for this fiscal year, an $88,000 additional expense in our group insurance program. So I just want to clarify that for council.
Nothing further from me right now.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Just to clear up something, Ms. Reese, do town staff pay for health insurance other than the deductible?
Depends on the coverage level. Employees with single coverage, the employer pays 100%, so the town has always paid 100% for single coverage. For employee cover, if the employee chooses to have coverage that includes a dependent or a spouse or full family coverage, the cost share is split 50-50 for that component.
Okay.
So we're out of the, anticipating where you're heading with this, we may be out of alignment with some plans regarding single coverage in terms of the employer paying more, but we're out of alignment a different direction for those that have benefit cover or dependent coverage, spouse, children, or family. Our plan pays much less than typical in that regard.
When you say out of alignment with what?
Lots of other employers, typically, public sector employers and even private sector that I'm aware of.
Okay. But town staff are not sharing in this increase?
Unless, if they
they're
have,
spouse and employee, or they're a spouse and family.
if they
maybe.
have single coverage, that is a true statement.
Okay.
In terms of the premium amount, monthly premiums.
Okay. Then something else I wanted to point out. There's a commission component with this as well. Ms. Reese had supplied that to me. It was $22,000 and some change in commission that your company is going to receive for this.
Not for this plan, for the retiree.
Okay.
That was,
Post-65 retiree plan.
right, that's the Benestar program for the retired employees that are Medicare eligible.
But is it a part of what we're voting on?
I don't think that's included in this. I think what we've got is the health insurance with UMR, the dental insurance, the life and accidental death, life AD&D renewal was standard.
Okay, because my question was.
Oh, and vision
Will
stays the
Hort-
same.
Will Horton receive commissions for these packages? And I guess,
The answer would be no. We have a fee structure that we negotiated several months ago and contracted for. And even though we're changing carriers and changing a PBM, changing stop-loss reinsurance, that does not affect that. All of those are quoted net, meaning no commission. And we just charge the town the fee structure that we negotiated.
okay, just, my assumption was that it was, but going forward, since we've got this other contract that'll probably be coming up as well, and there's already concern about the cost escalating, if there's anything you can do with the commissions, because the other contractors, multiple contractors that bid against you, bid a little bit less money for the service and no commission. So, that would be something you open the door by saying, you're open to go back to anything. So, that'd be a future conversation. You don't have to answer it now, but the taxpayers in Normal would appreciate it.
Sure.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. First, I believe this first question is probably for staff, but then a couple for Horton thereafter. The 16-month plan contract that we're talking about, that's just a one-time thing to get our benefit period and our plan term on the same schedule. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And why have they not been up to this point?
Historic, basically. Years ago, I'm going to jump in, sorry, Ms. Kier. Please. Years ago, before I joined the town, so a very, very long time ago, when we went to a self-funded plan, for some reason, the town started that self-funded program with a September 1st fiscal year. And so that our group insurance program has always been on a September fiscal year, although the town operates our financials on an April 1st fiscal year. That's been the case since the 80s when we went to a self-funded plan. Sometime during my tenure, I'm going to say maybe the last 10 years or so, when we implemented various plan design changes, we decided to make those plan design changes, for example, higher deductibles, different coverage levels for certain procedures. We decided to make those plan design changes effective January 1st to comply with health savings accounts, because your health savings account is on a calendar year, so we made plan design benefit on a fiscal year or a calendar year, but we retained the financial component on the plan's fiscal year, September 1st. So we would have, for a while, premiums going up September 1st, but your benefits didn't change until January 1st, and it was cumbersome. So then we started considering, well, should we just make premiums change on January 1 and benefit changes January 1? And so ultimately, we're finally to the point where it makes more sense to get everything on a calendar year so that the benefits, the premiums, and all the financials match the health savings account, because that is on a calendar year basis.
Mr. Preston, I'm guessing you're, never mind, I was going to make a joke. Go right ahead.
No, go. I'm interested now. Go ahead. We'll let that simmer. Turning to Horton, of the 20 or so providers that you guys reached out to, and if I heard you correctly, there were about 10 that didn't respond. Is that in large part due to the 16-month term that's unique to this year, or is that due to some of our larger claims that have also been highlighted here?
Most all the responses were due to uncompetitive rates due to ongoing claims, large claims.
Okay. So the 16-month is not, which is unique to this year, is not as big of a factor as the large claims.
That's correct. But even the 16-month was a challenge to our incumbent carrier. Would not do it until the 13th hour when we were told, I told them, or town told them that they would be moving on. And even the offer that they offered at that time with a 16-month was not competitive. It was just trying to save grace.
Okay. Is 150,000 stop loss, is that a standard amount that a lot of municipalities our size or funds our size, I guess, would be talking about? And has that been part of your guys' conversation this year as well, as if that figure needs to adjust one way or the other?
Yeah, you asked the question perfectly. It is based on your size, the complexity of the group, et cetera. That is about the sweet spot, or that is the sweet spot for your size group. The plans offered, the finances involved in it. Would you be interested in, if we went lower, it would certainly have a rise in the cost of reinsurance, because then we're shifting risk. If we went higher, I don't necessarily recommend that. We'd save a little bit on the reinsurance, not necessarily on the total package, though.
Okay, so if some of our large claims continue in a trend similar to they have been, it seems to me like we're just kind of limited in what we can do to control the cost, because that's the biggest driver. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, yes. So there are some, though, again, we've exhausted everything possible that we could, that Blue Cross offered, to try to contain costs. So any remedies they offered, you've adopted. What was the biggest component and where the future's going, it has to be in the area of the reinsurance options, and then also the pharmacy. And one of the biggest options that we will be able to address differently under this new format will be specialty drugs. There's already been, in the implementation process, conversations of getting manufacturers' assistance and member assistance to lower their cost and the plan's cost. And that's one of the things the Costco PBM offers. They even go as far as allowing us to carve out the specialty drugs if we want to in the future, which we are waiting for, watching what the federal side does. If they allow us to import drugs, specialty drugs will certainly be one of those items to consider. Right now, it's on a voluntary basis. We don't have a great distribution system to import those specialty drugs, because most of them are what they call cold chain. They have to be delivered in a cold environment. And that's not in a perfect situation yet to do on a voluntary basis. On a planned basis, that whole system will change. And again, Costco will allow us to go direct under those circumstances. We can't do that right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, 17% for the health increase is a lot, especially when compared to the 0% that our dental side has increased each of the last 5 years, still 0, each of those. But I do appreciate those responses and the effort that both staff and Horton have gone through to minimize this and look at options to the extent that they exist to try and control some of these costs.
Ms. Smith?
Would this insurance carrier had to have filed with the state to get approval for the rate increases they put in place for all of their contract holders?
So this is different. This is a reinsurance market that we do, and we search A+ rated carriers, and done on big scale. So it's regulated differently, unlike the individual fully insured plans that have to be approved on a state basis. And this is totally a different scenario from that. I'm sorry, I can't explain it anymore than just what it is. It's not regulated by that. It's more of a it's not state regulated, state mandated, or anything of that such, being self-funded.
And what's the participation rate among employees for the health insurance plans?
In general, you're talking about, per Ms. Reese's comments before, year overall is, so Horton represents 22 other public entities. And quite honestly, the average overall of what you cost share is right in with everybody else.
I'm talking in terms of how many employees out of the total employees are using the plan.
I think Ms. Kier has that information in terms of enrollment.
Yes, yeah. So in terms of the active employees who are enrolled in the plan, our enrollment is extremely high. It's very high. I could count the number of employees who are full-time who do not take the health insurance plan on probably 2 hands.
So there's no adverse selection going on?
No, not
Thank
to
you.
my knowledge, no.
Further on this item? Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks for your information and thoroughly answering our questions. I've always appreciated in my time up here that you're a fee-for outfit. And so you scale your hours invested in us up and down regardless of the compensation. And certainly you've been earning your fee this time around.
I don't look at that when I represent our clients.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, it's probably not good business, but
Absolutely.
we fight for our clients every day, all the same.
Absolutely. And I remember not too many years ago that you actually lowered your
Yes.
fee to us one year.
Thank
I'm going to, listening to excellent questions and excellent answers. I've been in and around this game a little bit for a number of years. Different question. We have a good benefit package. This that we're being presented is good coverage.
Is that a question?
Yes,
or,
sir.
or a statement?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
it is a good package. Your benefit programs that you offer are very good. They're very much in line with other municipalities and entities that we represent, counties, cities, towns. The carriers involved, if that's more the question, and what's being represented there.
Absolutely.
It's not, it's in your space.
Okay.
The carriers that are involved. Costco's rather a newer innovator over the more recent years.
Yep.
But everybody's well familiar with the name, and it doesn't mean you could only get your prescriptions at Costco. There's 68,000
Thank you.
pharmacies that
You know where I
members
was going with all
will
of
be
this.
able to go.
Yeah.
It was very important to us to make sure, and again, your committee, your team did an excellent job in making sure that we had little or no disruption, quite honestly, in the pharmacy, in the providers section, as much as we could overlay that to what we knew. You're in a good space.
Thank you. In this space, it's easy to enter into a race to the bottom, which generally means cutting availability, cutting services, not covering, particularly in pharmacy space, reducing the amount of drugs in the drug list that's actually on the covered list and increasing the list of uncovered drugs to try to manage increasing costs right now. And I know that's what a fair amount of strategies that are going on in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. Actually, you did gain, we brought back CVS, came back into the fold for the renewal, which that pharmacy group was excluded last year from your plans. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Oh, wait, we need a change of Ms. Kier. I'm going to kick you out and ask Ms.
I don't want to call the roll. I'll step out here.
Nothing happens till Teresa's back in the chair.
Bring Ms. Denham forward.
Borrow one of those wireless mics from Parks and Rec next time. Mr. Nord.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
No.
And Mayor Kus.
Aye. The item is approved. That concludes our omnibus for the evening. We have 4 items of general orders. The first is an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 operating and capital investment budget.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Ms.
thank you,
Reese?
and council, thank you. I'm going to invite Mr. Hune to come back to the table. And we don't have a presentation tonight. This is annual action that we ask of council to authorize all the budget modifications that occurred last fiscal year. But certainly he can give a couple of statements of highlighting what's in this very detailed, thorough, long report. and then we'll be happy to respond to questions. Mr. Nord, or excuse me, Mr. Hugh.
Thank you. Yes, this is part of our annual budget process. It effectively closes out the budget year for fiscal year 2021 by essentially offering up to council all of the budget adjustments that have been made throughout the fiscal year. It's a standard report that we provide every year to gain final council approval of our budget actions. A couple comments. This is it's not a lengthy report, but there's a lot going on in it in terms of numbers, up and down, sideways, all kinds of different things. I can explain a couple of things and then certainly react to any questions that you might have. The first part of the report where it talks about just total town-wide funds, so it looks at the adopted budget for 2021 for all funds, water, sewer, debt service, general funds, special revenue funds, NFT, capital funds, everything combined together. That was $134 million of original revenue budget. Over the course of the year, we do several budget adjustments, as you're well aware, to change things when needed, and we ended the budget with $141 million ending revenue budget. So we effectively increased, by $7 million. But I would caution you to not interpret from that certain things. I can tell you what those are. They're typically inter-fund transfers this year. We had some standard things where we carry over capital money into the capital funds, and what I mean by that is fiscal year 1920, we had a budget plan to spend certain capital funds in that year. They were not completed for whatever reason. They were delayed or finished. If they were delayed, the money doesn't go away. It doesn't go to some other project. It just gets carried forward into the next year, and especially in those funds. So we essentially re-budget for it in the next fiscal year. So we have adopted budget in 2021 that gets increased once we close out the previous fiscal year with budget dollars from the old year that weren't spent. That generally drives a lot of these changes. This year was unique, as you're well aware. 2021 was, we're going to call it the COVID year for finance and for other things. A lot went on that year, and when we closed out 1920, we had a budget adopted for 2021 last fiscal year, that was $35,000 to the good, basically a balanced budget. That was a pre-COVID budget. We changed it, we modified that right away in 2021 to reflect what we thought was going on with the budget and the economy because of COVID, and made several presentations to council about what was going on with revenue. It was kind of a constant process. I'm sorry, Mr. Maria, question?
Yeah, I mean, before you get too far from the point that I was going to ask, you said that budget dollars for different projects that may not have been spent the previous year, they roll forward and then they're rebudgeted?
Correct.
I was under the understanding that if something has been approved and it doesn't get finished that year, the money doesn't get reallocated to another project. It just keeps going forward until that money's spent, similar to the $1.6 million for the, whatever money it was for the underpass phase 1 that's been going on for the past several years. 1.4. So is the money, any money that's not spent, is it rebudgeted the next year, or does any of it not show up if it hasn't been spent, and we can, it'll show up as an expenditure that wasn't in this budget because it was approved a budget cycle before or two?
Sure, by way of example, motor fuel tax is a good example of that process, where there are multiple projects that are going on with bridge and road construction that are funded by the state motor fuel tax and restricted to those uses. $2.2 million of projects that were approved in 1920 but not completed were rebudgeted in 2021 to continue that project. So there's things budgeted in the new budget year that is approved, and then items that were approved in the previous year typically do get rebudgeted, mostly in the capital funds. We do some rebudgeting of general fund money, like if we have an encumbrance hasn't been paid yet, we'll move it over to the new budget. If we have a known project that's not necessarily encumbered yet, but there is a committed process to it, then that'll get rolled over too. But we look at the carryovers very closely every year. We ask department heads to look at what you didn't spend. Is it a real project? Is it need to be rebudgeted? Will it continue on? And capital projects go over several fiscal years. They don't just get done in one fiscal year, unfortunately. Some do, most don't. Most big ones don't. They carry over several fiscal years. So you set the budget originally and you move that forward as you don't spend the funds in certain years.
So then, yeah. So then, if I understand correctly, that means, for example, like road repairs. Just because we see we're spending more the next year, that doesn't tell us that we're actually putting more money into it. There might be rollover funds from the previous year that we hadn't spent that are making it look like we're actually spending more. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a tough one to kind of confirm. You know, the town dedicates pretty much a generally uniform amount to road resurfacing and street repair. We at times move over a fair amount of money from the previous year to the new year to where we have more fund balance available. It doesn't supplant the expenses that we plan on. It just simply enhances them going forward.
Okay.
If I could jump in, a couple of examples that you've used, Mr. Nord, for example, the underpass study, phase 1. We've talked about this a number of times in the last 12 months or so. The council authorized the phase 1 design, and so the money was budgeted, but the actual design has occurred over multiple years. So those funds that still remain for that particular expense get carried over year after year after year into the budget. The other thing that might be maybe a little maybe clearer is just an agenda item that you addressed earlier this evening, which is the Uptown study, the Uptown parking study. As explained, those monies were budgeted last fiscal year, but for various reasons we didn't do the study. It was COVID year. We didn't figure that it was wise to do the study when Amtrak service was down, students weren't here, not many cars, and we were trying to tighten our belts. So the money had been budgeted. Because the study didn't occur, we then carried those funds over to this fiscal year. So that's what Mr. Hune is explaining in terms of when we planned for something and we didn't do it in the fiscal year for whatever reason, we tend to carry those funds over. We call them encumbered, so we encumber those funds into the next fiscal year.
Mr. McCarthy, you had a...
Sure. I just want a point of clarification. Is it's tempting, particularly because the columns are next to each other in a big printed book, to compare a column called budgeted versus a column called actual spend. And the problem there is, as Mr. Hune has so well articulated, that some funds that were budgeted in one year get spent in a different year. So when we're comparing things like this year versus that year, that we compare apples to apples and budgeted to budgeted and spend to spend, not budgeted to spend. And I think that's part of the conflation of the confusion of that question, is the temptation that we all have to want to compare those two different columns that really can't be compared to each other. Thank you for the detail in the report. And all my years sitting up here, I think that's probably the biggest that I've seen. The most numbers presented in the report for this annual process we go through every year. I always greatly appreciate the work you go through to try to make it as clear as possible and as lay as possible for everybody watching what's really going on with our finances. And I also want to say, 18 months, 20 months ago, we were having very dire, serious conversations, and I'm really ecstatic that that is not the reality that you're presenting us with tonight. And I think that we should all kind of couch this conversation and remember how we were all bracing for catastrophe in our finances and that we're not there. Part of that was your great forecasting work, the public spending more than we thought they were going to, and some decisions by all of us to cut back hard on some recommendations that you went. So I appreciate that this report that we do every year, but I'm really happy that it's as good of a report as it is. Thanks.
But wait, Mr. McCarthy, there's more.
There's more. I know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not sure if my forecasting was that good because we took a very conservative forecast and we didn't hit it luckily, and we always do. So to kind of dovetail on that comment, remove the general fund in terms of that's where a lot of the activity is that doesn't relate to essentially a carryover or some interfund transfer that's unique. As I said, the general fund had a difficult year last year. We made significant budget cuts to react to the potential full value of the economic impact of COVID. Luckily, it did not occur to the extent we thought it was going to occur, and we always want to plan for something that's going to be dramatic and reasonable, and hope for something that's less in terms of our projections, which in this case it was. To give you throw more numbers at you again, we did reduce the general fund revenue by about $6.3 million over this fiscal year. That was what I would call COVID impacted revenues, and there's about 70 of them that we actually end up hitting over the year. That range from local state sales tax, food and beverage, hotel, motel, admissions to the pools, admissions to CDM, to small stuff like swim lessons. We hit everything we possibly could. We did one thing that came forward that was unexpected and not planned for, but certainly helpful, was the federal government provided some relief to municipalities. We received a little over $2 million, about 2.6 million kids under some of the state stuff. We also received a significant boost from our partners Rivian with all the construction going out there. The plan review fees, the permit fees were extraordinary, but it just matches the extraordinary efforts that are going out there to the plan in terms of expenses from that company. Use tax was a little bit up too because of some changes the state's made to collections for internet sales tax. So that really helped offset that 6.3 significantly. About 4.7 was offset by those revenue sources that we expected. That helped a lot. That came after we made most decisions to cut a lot of programs, $8.2 million. So we ended the year with a pretty good surplus that we were not really expecting, but happy to see. And then I think Mr. Norton mentioned earlier, just last item, the transfers we made at year end. The council, as part of the budget process, was well aware that we suggested, given we have this surplus that's unique time, a perfect storm surplus essentially to have because of what occurred with the federal government, a better than expected revenue, and really significant cuts provided a surplus for us. The question is, what do we do with that? Well, we suggested in the budget process to essentially put that in two different places for now. One to fund some debt service payoff, and one to help bolster the vehicle and equipment fund. Those decisions were made, again, for some long-term purposes. One, it will help us pay off some debt that we don't necessarily want to refinance. We want to pay it off and enjoy less interest cost on that. And then we also put some of that surplus away as kind of an extra rainy day fund for the out years that there was some uncertainty about in terms of how we're going to be reacting to the out years in terms of recovery. And in hearing the discussion tonight, I think I need to apologize in terms of not giving the council enough information on what the Vehicle and Equipment Reserve Fund is. It gets a lot of discussion. It's a fund that we have as a government that many don't have, where we can actually set aside cash to purchase a lot of things. Most of my counterparts and most of my history in this role has not had that fund available to you. You just finance everything, or you have these purchase agreements for big trucks. We're able to buy things outright when it makes sense. Obviously, you supported the action to finance, and that made sense in terms of value and efficiency of use of our cash. So we moved that money over to Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund. That fund's been in place for a number of years, even before I got here, probably decades. And it's really more of a sub-fund of the general fund than a restricted fund that we use. The town council, the staff have carved out, as an accounting exercise, a way to carve money out of general fund uniformly every single year to set aside money to pay for vehicles and equipment. That was its primary role for decades, and it continues to be. But yes, we do use that fund for other things, because since it is an arm of the general fund, How much we fund that every year, we can control. We can decide to balance some efforts in the general fund, the core operations. So it's really, I appreciate this idea that we use that only for vehicle and equipment, but we don't. It primarily, am I getting too long?
Mr. Hune, I think,
I apologize.
let's get back to the topic
Gotcha.
at hand.
So I thank you. Anyway, that we did land, we ended the year in a strong position in 2021, even better than what we projected for the budget. And we're able to actually set aside additional funds in debt service project reserve and still maintain our reserves in general fund. So we are entering this budget season in a fairly strong position in terms of reserves available, and the council will have an opportunity to reprioritize those reserves when we go forward as part of the budget process, and staff will certainly make a recommendation. But that kind of gives you an overall sense of this report and too much detail in other areas too. So.
Further questions on this? Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Are the vehicle equipment funds, are those used when you calculate the general fund reserves?
No.
Okay, so when we talk about the general fund reserves, there's this big chunk of money in the vehicle and equipment fund that's not being included in that calculation. So we actually have more in the general fund reserves than what that calculation shows.
Correct. From a budgetary purpose, we don't include that as part of the reserves. In the actual annual financial report, it does show up as a reserve for the general
I
fund.
think we've covered that when we have reviewed in September of each year with the auditor, the comprehensive annual financial report and the audit statements, where it's been explained that the numbers in that report combine what we see as vehicle and equipment replacement fund and the general fund, but they're reported jointly in that report. Right.
Sure, because if memory serves right, 13% was the goal, but we're at like 17% general fund reserves.
15% is our goal.
15's the goal, and we're at, what, 17? Is that?
We're right around 16, 17. Typically, we plus or minus 2% on that every year.
And then if we include the vehicle equipment funds, it's even higher.
Correct.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 8 is an ordinance vacating the public right-of-way on Electric Avenue.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
I would point out that there was a slight error in your packet. If you will look at the map that was provided to you, the original map in the packet showed the vacation of Electric Avenue going all the way down to the end of the road. And it turns out this is the new alignment that we had already vacated, or actually Mitsubishi, now Rivian, has owned that property for quite a while. So basically, the property we're talking about is highlighted in red on your new map.
Yes, Mayor, if I could jump in, thank you for that explanation. I did provide to you at your place setting a new page, packet page 8-5. I wanted to just explain that packet page 8-6 is the actual vacation plat, which is accurate. It's just the map here, and our report was a little bit off. What we're asking council to vacate is 1,000 feet of of Electric Avenue. The eastern end of Electric Avenue was vacated actually in the late 1980s, I believe around 1988. So the case for vacation stays the same as identified in the report. It's just the actual distance of Electric Avenue that we're seeking your authorization to vacate is different than what we explained in the report. So that's our explanation, and certainly be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Questions? Mr. Nord?
The GIS map shows that shows that that road extends further, doesn't it? I mean, is GIS up to date? Or does it show that Rivian owns that?
I don't know what GIS is showing. I didn't look, and staff, if they know, they can come forward, and it's a challenge when they're behind me, so I can't see who's, is anybody standing and jumping on it? Apparently no takers, so I don't know what GIS is reporting, Mr. North.
Okay. Have we talked to the other business owners or the other property owners along that road to get their input before we vacate their access?
Well, the only property owners that would be affected are Rivian, who owns both north and south side. As I indicated, the property east has already been vacated.
Can we pull up GIS and maybe that'll make sense what I'm talking about?
I can answer the GIS question.
Okay.
GIS appears to show the road going all the way, but we do have information in an ordinance from the town vacating the eastern half.
And it was recorded?
Yes.
Okay, so those property owners know that eastern half. But on the half that's on this map that you're showing, what about the property owners along there that's not Rivian?
Rivian is the property owner on both sides.
Okay, GIS shows different. Can we pull up?
No, I don't
No,
have
I
GIS
don't think we're going to pull that
connected.
up, Mr. Nord.
Okay, I had a feeling
Mr. Day, is that accurate?
we wouldn't pull that up.
That Rivian's on both sides of the proposed? That is
But here's what GIS shows today.
okay.
This is that road. There's a property owner here in purple that's not Rivian. Then there's this one in green that's not Rivian as well. So have those property owners been notified that their access is going to go away? Because now, the line's going to go right here where this green bar comes down.
The question's been asked and answered. Rivian owns the properties on both sides of,
Well, GIS shows different, and this is
Well,
a
well,
property
could-
rights
the-
question. I don't want to put the town in hot water that, we didn't talk to these, because this is Suffolk Northern Suffolk, it's the railroad. Then this GIS
Norfolk
shows
Southern.
it's somebody else, a different business completely.
Mr. Nord, the
appreciate your
GIS
concern.
could
We're
be
gonna lose
inaccurate.
access. I don't want to put the town in hot water if we have not talked to these other business
Mr.
owners.
Nord, the
because-
GIS could be wrong.
I appreciate your concern. I've just checked with legal, and Mr. Day indicates that the property owners that are affected have been notified, and that would be Rivian.
Okay. Because if this comes back, I just want it on record that I pointed this out.
Understood, thank you.
Fair enough. Further
And-
on this item?
I've got one more question.
Oh, certainly.
So this is over 2 acres of property that's taxpayer property that we're giving to Rivian. We're doing this at no charge? Is that right?
It is accurate that we are asking council to vacate Electric Avenue, and then the ownership would become Rivian's ownership. In terms of giving it to them, yes, there would be no dollars exchanged, but we are talking about a street that is not used by the public. And here comes Mr. Day to explain what the municipalities, what we could do and can't do in regard to vacating the right-of-way. But an alternative view would be the taxpayers don't have to incur the expense of maintaining it as well. Mr. Day, would you like to talk about the statute?
Yes, well, in terms of when we say this is town property, it's right-of-way that was dedicated as part of the platting process for the street. It's not property that the town could use for any other purposes. It's only to be used for a public right-of-way, which is the way that it came to the town, so there's no other use that we could use it for. So it's not as though we're giving property away. It's more we're giving back the dedication that was given to us when the parcel was originally plotted. And under the statutory procedures for a vacation, it's when you have a vacation, you split the road down the middle and each parcel reverts back to each adjoining landowner.
Okay. Would it have been possible to have just leased the road?
No.
We wouldn't have been able to lease access and they could put their building on it and the town still retain ownership?
We only have interest in it as a right-of-way, not as any other type of property.
But it's possible that we could, because it just seems odd that we're giving away 2 acres for no charge, even if the town has no use. The town hasn't there's not been much maintenance that has gone on out there because it's not heavily used, so it doesn't typically get plowed anyway.
Mr. Day, could you clear that up? We do not own that property. Is that accurate?
We own the right-of-way, so there's different types of property ownership. There's what you call a fee simple, which is your general, what you think of as a property ownership, which you can do anything with. The property that was dedicated to us as a right-of-way can be used as a right-of-way. It's not just property that the town owns in fee simple that can do anything it wants with. It's limited to it being a right-of-way, so we can use it as a road or we can use it as nothing.
Okay, but it is possible for it to have been leased out. But either way,
No, I don't think that is
All right.
possible, but
either way, we're giving it away for $0. That's the part that I'm not comfortable with. We
well, we're
should be getting
vacating the
something.
right-of-way that was dedicated to us through the plat, and it's reverting back to the original owners when we're not using the right-of-way anymore. That is the action that the town is taking.
Is it typical to do it for $0?
Yes, in fact, that's, unless there's some special circumstance where we're giving it to a specific owner, yes, under the statute, it automatically reverts back at no cost to the original owners.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks. Just so I'm understanding, given the difference with our new map that talks about just the 1,000 feet that we're talking about now in comparison to the original, was the language in the packet where it talks about the property owner east is not being Rivian, is that still the case with just this shorter tract, or is where we are, where we end right now, it's still to the east, technically is Rivian, given this 1,000 foot, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct, yeah, and the property owner to the east would be unaffected by this since they had already lost the access back in '88.
Yep, and the further east, that's in reference to the, while it's zone industrial, it's the ag land that the farmer, or whoever farms that, it seems like they're able to access off College Avenue. Nothing changes in that regard.
Correct.
I will take a quick moment on topic with this, though a quarter step away, to say that I love when things are coming before us that are positive signs of all of the great things that Rivian is doing and the growth that they are having. And I would all day rather have them want to take control of a street so that they can continue to grow and build than a street just not be used by anyone and sit there and deteriorate. Thanks.
Ms. Lorenz, and then
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Preston, for that segue, because I was sitting here thinking the same thing. You know, this is a company that is doing phenomenal things, and let's not lose sight of that. Let's not lose sight of the fact that they forgave, or I'm not sure what the right word is, chose not to exercise the incentive for the $1 million. You know, kind of just can't envision myself looking at Rivian and saying, but could you pay us 25 grand for this land? You know, come on. It's got to pass the sanity check. And while your efforts perhaps are noble to find a revenue stream, this ain't it. Let's be business friendly. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, I'm excited we're giving back the right-of-way to original property owners, or the people who now own the original property. So you guys can do with it what you want, and that we can be good partners as they're trying to be good community partners and players in our community. My colleague, Ms. Lorenz, already mentioned the $1 million. Let's not forget the over 2,000 jobs that they've created when they told us they were going to only be 500 at this point. I am over the moon thrilled with what's going on out there, and I think we should continue to try to be good partners and help them continue to grow in any way we can. And we have every indication that they're going to continue to be great community partners as well. And so I'm thrilled we can, in whatever small way this helps, help. So I just want to go on record for that. Thanks.
Ms. Smith?
So if I'm looking at the maps, since there's been two, I just want to get some clarity. Electric Avenue is only serving, at this time, right away or no right away, is only serving Rivian?
Yes.
That is
And,
correct.
There's an area where it goes down on the big map that was in the packet. And is that still Rivian?
Yes, you're talking about that on the original page 8-5, where it turns down and goes into their parking lot?
Yes.
Yeah, that is Rivian's property.
Okay, so we're basically giving a right-of-way away to property that is dead-ending into the property owner's property.
Yes.
Okay.
That's accurate.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston? Aye. Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The item is approved, and we're just going to take about a 7-minute break here. We've got a fair amount of work left to do, and so get up and stretch your legs for a few minutes, and we'll come right back.
just fig? It is. This one's blueberry flavored, so it's, they're really good. I don't trust my stomach. That's typically how I operate as well, but I was getting pretty hungry.
It's fake, but I'm getting it removed tomorrow. So what time does the thing start tomorrow night? 5:30?
5:30.
And it goes to 7?
Mhm.
Okay, and will there be food?
Pardon?
Will there be food?
Oh, there'll be a lot of food.
Okay, then I won't feed Bella ahead of time.
Well, kudos to whoever idea it was to put snacks in front of us. At first, I was like, why is this here? But now I know. Oh, my microphone's.
That scares me because they're. So this is. So you're saying you're how it is now. That's what I asked her. He said that all of them have a blood on it, but they don't contact us because trying to look at it. I mean, they swear they're the type of people. This section. There you go, it's capping.
Get my notes here.
Good. These are actually really just
That looks really good.
They're very good.
And you know what we
My
brought in?
wife gets these, the blueberry and the red room.
We brought in some, that's okay, brought in some RX bars.
Oh, yeah.
Man, they are selling like crazy. Those things are good. Have you had them?
It's been a while.
Mhm.
I'm not a huge bar guy.
I usually am not either, but
When I traveled a lot, I did it.
Let's go ahead and resume here tonight. Item 9 is a resolution reapproving the Kelly Glen PUD preliminary development plan having to do with Henry and Rab.
Move approval.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. Is there discussion on this item? Mr. Nord?
Thank you. This one here, would you confirm that they are being charged a tap-on fee, sanitary sewer tap-on fee?
Phone is on? Okay, there we go. Yes, Mr. Nord, as communicated earlier, I think in our email exchange, this area of Kelly Glen, or the Kelly Glen subdivision, is in 2 tap-on districts, so they are subject to 2 tap-on fees.
Okay, and that tap-on fee map is one that I have brought up multiple times. It's not updated. So there are areas in town.
Mr. Nord, we're not talking about the tap-on fee map. We're talking about a Kelly Glen PUD. Your point was a good question, and it was answered. We're not going back to have discussion on the tap-on map tonight.
Yeah, it's not updated, so I won't go on to it. Thank you.
Further on this item? Ms. Smith?
Just for clarification, would you explain why we have item 9 and item 10?
Well, the two items are combined, and item 10 has to follow item 9. This is a standard practice. We've done it a few times with council in recent months as we've seen residential subdivisions start to grow again. So the preliminary development plan for Kelly Glen is good for a number of years, and it has expired. So before we can approve item number 10, before we can take action to approve the third edition, we need to reapprove the preliminary development plan. So that's what we're asking council to do tonight. First action would be to reapprove the PUD, the Planned Unit Development Preliminary Plan, and then the next item would be then subsequently to approve the third edition, which is also the final portion of the subdivision to develop.
And do we have an estimate of the number of units involved in this addition?
Yes, that would be in item number 10. That would, I believe it's 12 single-family lots.
Okay.
Single-family residential lots.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved, and as explained, resolution number 10 is conditionally approving the Kelly Glen Planned Unit Development Third Edition Final Plat.
Move approval?
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the resolution is approved. That concludes general orders. We have one item of new business, and that is an ordinance amending the Bloomington Normal Enterprise Zone designating ordinance and authorizing the approval of an intergovernmental agreement regarding the zone.
Move approval?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Reese?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to have this item on your agenda this evening. We have a special guest here this evening to talk over the standardized incentive language, Mr. Patrick Hoban, who's the CEO of the Economic Development Council. I'm going to invite Mr. Hoban to come forward. He gets the hot seat in the middle. And basically, this item that is presented to you this evening is a multi-jurisdictional action item. City of Bloomington and McLean County have already addressed this issue. Following our action, the next two governmental bodies to address this would be Ford County and Gibson City, because the 5 governing bodies are the designated units of the enterprise zone. So this action tonight is the culmination of a couple of years, Mr. Hoban working on this to get this to the finish line. And we think it is a very good step for economic development in our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hoban.
Thank you, City Manager Reese. Actually, I think it was September 30th, 2019. City Manager Reese, one of our, probably 2 months on the job, handed me a version of this and said, here's what we'd like to see going forward. Come to find out, this has actually been in the works for almost a decade. I mean, speaking to the last economic developer, he's like, you're doing pretty good at 2 years, because I tried to do it for 8. We haven't got this far. So this is a culmination of a lot of work by a lot of very smart people. I spent enough time with attorneys over the past couple of years. I'm thinking about going back to school. I got my fair share of it. But no, this is a great combination of things that we talked about at the first joint meeting amongst everyone, saying it'd be really nice if we all knew what the entry level was to do a deal in McLean County. And this is something that everyone came together, modeled after some other enterprise zone abatements that were available, and actually one that was on the books prior that was based off of the being advantage as far as like what the high impact businesses were. So that was a citywide, or actually countywide, economic development strategic plan. And they identified certain businesses that were in there, which we've identified as high impact businesses. And so those are ones that if it falls in that category, you get 5 years straight through. If it does not fall in that category, it ends up being graduated, which is similar to some of our other municipalities around us in those zones, where if it started off at 100 years abatement the first year, then it goes down to 80, then 60, then 40, then 20. We did something a little different. We added some perks in there that says if you do something that gives back to the community that provides a bigger ripple, we'll go ahead and make up the difference. So for instance, if you can prove to us that you're hiring local workers to build it, we'll give you another 20%. If you can prove you're hiring local workers to work there, another 20%. If you team up with one of our high schools or community college and create an apprenticeship program, another 20%. And last but not least, if you can prove that for that occupation, you're hiring at 120% of minorities or women, another 20%. So it's a bigger ripple effect. The more they can show they're giving back to us, the more we'll give back to them. But the goal is to have one coupon that we all understand. So if anyone wants to know what the deal is, here's the deal. It's there. Not to say that if a mega deal comes in, it couldn't go higher, but for right now, this will level the playing field compared to us and everybody else. Because in economic development, time is money. And every single RFP that we get in, it'll ask flat out, what can I get? How long does it take to approve, and who approves it? And right now, I'm ashamed to say I've got it right in there. It can take 6 months. I have no idea how much you're going to get, and we have to go through at least 5 to 6 taxing bodies. Other municipalities can say, here's what we offer. It's written on the website. We don't have that yet. If we get this approved by everybody, the state approves it, we're going to know what the rules are. So that's what we're putting forward. I think staff did a wonderful job in outlining in your packet exactly what the changes were compared to the other version. If you want me to, we can go through each one of them. It's a lot. I know it's late past my bedtime, so it's really up to you on how far you want me to dive into this.
I think we'll leave it to questions.
Okay.
Are there questions? Ms. Smith?
Yes, I recall that you gave a presentation to a meeting where McLean County board members were there, City of Bloomington, and Town of Normal representatives were there. Do you recall when that was?
Probably at least 2 years ago. That was my first year on the job.
Okay, so that was when you were making the case for arguing to establish this, so that once this is in place and all of these taxing bodies have approved the policy, then what you're saying is that you have the authorization to tell any interested parties that this is what we can offer you.
Correct. Yeah, this will be the rules everyone's approving going forward, that all of us can tell an entity, here's what we offer in McLean County. Then it will be up to myself and the board, 18 members plus Ford County and Gibson City, so 20 members to do the audits to say, did they meet the requirements?
And how competitive is this package compared to, say, Peoria, who is to the west of us, or Champaign and Springfield and Decatur to the south?
It's on par. I think what we're beating them at right now is by adding the perks. So those extra perks, if they're not in one of those high impact business areas or significant businesses, we've got perks that they can get more compared to the other areas.
And how are those perks provided to the parties that qualify?
So the regular abatement that goes forward, if they're not a high impact business, 180 on down, that is abated. If it is above that, if it becomes a perk, then the taxes will actually be collected and then given back and refunded as a rebate.
Okay. And in terms of the distinction between retail and the non-retail, the retail has a shorter period.
3 years.
And can you explain the rationale between making that distinction between retail and the other grouping?
So to make the distinction between the industry itself, or
Yes.
just why we did 3 versus 5?
Both.
Okay, so if they're making something, or if they're selling something there, then it would be considered retail unless they're actually manufacturing it too. So a brewery, that since they are manufacturing, would be a manufacturer. If they're just selling goods, then it's only a 3-year deal, because that's a traditional retailer. The reason behind a 5-year versus a 3 is because typically non-retailers have higher multipliers, meaning that for every position that works at a Brandt, a Ferrero, or a Rivian, there's normally 3 other jobs supporting it, like a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker, because we all need more services involved.
Okay, and would there be an expectation that for a retail business, there would be a finite amount of improvements that it would do to the property?
Yes,
Oh.
it's 25 jobs and then $250,000 invested, which it used to be higher, but we lowered it down to help out some smaller mom and pops.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Just one question and then some comments. I can reserve the comments if I need to, unless you're,
Sure.
if you only want to do questions now. I don't really care. My only question is there a specific reason why we are limited to this only being pursued in the enterprise zone? And do you think that long-term that will change to where this standardized incentive program or something like it will be able to apply beyond just the limits of the enterprise zone specifically?
So we did the enterprise zone because enterprise zone is the area that we targeted, or they're normally established because that's the area that needs the TLC, tender loving care, compared to the rest of the area. So that's the ones you want to target to try to encourage development. Again, this is just a baseline. So pure example, if there's a $5 billion deal that comes in and they might want some more, this is the base, and you can always add on to it because you yourselves, the school district, everybody else can do their own development agreements on top of it. This is what brings us a level playing field to everybody else. So yeah, you can do deals outside of it, but for what this program is, because also within the zone, you get sales tax exemption on your building materials, there's some other perks for power, but you add all it together, and it's normally in an area that you're wanting to develop. So we can always amend the zone to add other areas, take some areas out, but that's the perks of being in the zone. It's not limited to, you can always do things outside of it.
Yeah.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Just to be clear, we're only approving the town's part of the property tax.
Correct.
abatement. We're not overseeing any other taxing body. They make their decision on their own.
Yes, they're their own entities.
And if for some reason the school district says no, that doesn't mean that the whole thing falls apart. It's just theirs not.
Right. So because you are one of the 5 participating entities, this is actually a state program, and you guys are the designated units of government. We just administer it for you. Any other entity, like the airport, they can participate as well after the rules. And they can participate on any level they want to as well. That's up to them to participate.
Good. For the jobs, is this new jobs? Or just if
Yes.
like an existing business wants to move and relocate, their 25 jobs will qualify them?
No, it's got to be new jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually a line in there about relocating on where they're going to be relocating to as well to make sure there's no poaching going on.
Okay, yeah, and the enterprise zone, I'm glad that Mr. Preston asked about that. I too would like to see it expanded to everywhere that this body manages the taxes for.
Sure.
Because, gosh, we might miss a business that just wants to be outside of somewhere else, and that process for us to move the enterprise zone may take longer than what is allowed.
So we can do that, and right now, because the way that the zone was drawn, there is acreage available. I can't remember the total number of available right off the top of my head, but the state requires at least 25 jobs to amend that. So there has to be a project to do it, but there's plenty of areas that are actually in the zone that I don't think will ever get commercial development. So we've got room to move things around.
Sure, but what we're voting on, it doesn't require them. Or if we wanted to, would we be able to offer these same incentives outside of the enterprise zone, just with the authority we have as this governing body?
Yeah, you guys can offer whatever you want anywhere outside the zone or inside the zone. This just establishes the baseline for inside the zone, and we can always come back and move.
And we're working with Mr. Hoban on this because he's the administrator for the enterprise zone. So that's why all the 5 designating units are adopting the same thing. If the town council wanted to expand this to elsewhere within the corporate limits of normal, we can do that on our own.
Okay, good.
Mr. Nord, can I interject on that? I think it might help with the discussion, but the enterprise zone can be adjusted for a situation like you're talking about.
Yeah, we did it recently for Ferrero. Everyone got together and moved and added on so that Ferrero could do their project. And we
So
still
if-
have money in the bank to save to add on.
If there's a business that wants to locate outside that zone and wants those perks, if you will, and we think it's a good idea, collectively, we can adjust that boundary.
Sure, I understand how the enterprise zone works. That's a separate incentive package. This is a separate incentive package, so that I get. The business types, when was that favorable business type list created, and who created it?
So in 2015, I believe the whole community got together to create the Be an Advantage, and inside that document, it was a huge SWOT analysis, and that's when those were identified. And so from there, whenever they reapplied for the enterprise zone, they went ahead and added those as the high-impact businesses. So we just took what was already in place and didn't really amend much of it besides separating some language when it came to manufacturing and IT manufacturing.
Sure. I like this, but, you know, I think it's a great start. Some business types that are not considered desirable, which surprised me when I saw this, is just general manufacturing, including like vehicle component manufacturing. Those are not desirable, according to this. You know,
I
so
was a little surprised in the being advantage did not have manufacturing at all listed as a target.
yeah, you know, I would rather it be more inclusive, because we don't know the next need that someone's going to want to come to our community for, you know, so I hate to kind of push people off for that. So, you know, I see this as something that hopefully we can learn from, grow, and become better and better, because, yeah, before I got elected, you know, I was pushing for something like this as well, because, you know, I came up against the same thing, and we talked as well, you know, about how, gosh, McLean County just doesn't have this, and you go elsewhere and there's menus you can choose from and things. So I'm very, very happy to see that this is finally coming forward, and, you know, I'd like to see the next iteration for it to continue to be used, because, man, the more tools we give you, you know, the more jobs we have, the more our community grows.
Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, the point about manufacturing, would that be an example, though, where if the Coolest Manufacturing Company dropped on our doorstep, we could apply this or something like this package to them, even though they're not part of the high impact?
Yes, no, depending on the size of it, it's similar to what you guys did with Rivian or Brandt or any of the other ones. You could always do a deal. This just speeds up the process.
Right.
But it's also an opportunity that if we find out we're losing some deals because they're not a part of that, that we would come back and say, hey, we could probably get more deals if we added another category.
And that would be
And like we're amending it now, we can amend it again.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Mr. Preston?
Yeah, I'll insert my comments now. I love this. I think it's a great idea. I think it is something that will hopefully serve us really well and serve the community really well. There are two things that I know a lot of people in this community have talked about and have recognized for one way or another in the past as we have looked at different incentives. And one has been the dynamic of, you know, Bloomington versus Normal in terms of where new jobs are going to land. And the other is the concept of picking winners and losers. And man, if something like this is not just a great way forward that puts our community forward and also subsequently eliminates a lot of those kinds of feelings, right or wrong too. I mean, I just think there are so many benefits to this. I love the uniform and collaborative approach that comes from this for new development in the enterprise zone. I think it's great, and thank you, staff, and certainly to the EDC, Patrick, for leading the charge on this, and just keep going.
We could be enforced to one way or another. It's pretty fast around here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, my only question is you ready to stop talking legal terms? And
Yeah. Get back to selling? Sure.
Get back to selling? Yeah. No, just really comments, no questions on this. Long time coming. Certainly was a campaign issue in the last election here that we just went through, those of us that were up for election went through. And on the topic of, well, virtually everybody's mind here, business-wise, labor-wise, everybody's mind. And I think the large consensus is excitement and enthusiasm about a stated public line in the sand that we're here to play and we're here to try to attract business to our community in an organized and a structured way, and that we're open for business here. And so I appreciate all your work over the last few years, town staff. I appreciate all of that you guys have done to work on this and help move this down the road. I know it's been a long haul, and your work inside and outside of this agreement and the others is stellar always. So I'm enthused about it, enthusiastic supporter. I'll have more questions beyond this for you later, but happy to support this moving forward. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings.
Yes, I have one quick question, and I may have missed this, so please forgive me in asking this question. Considering there is 2 more entities that have to take a vote, when would be the expected time frame that, as you put it, we'd see it on the website?
So I have to speak for the state of Illinois now, because they get final say. And I
Yeah.
believe they've got between 30 and 90 days. Good news is they've already been contacted behind the scenes and took a look at a lot of the language already. So I'm hoping sooner than later. Yeah, so probably 30 to 60 days.
And so their take on it has been positive, because I know that's going to be.
Yes, no, we've got some decent consultants, and they've also been working with a lot of the staff that's been involved as well. So the feedback was all worked into probably the 6th or 7th version that's in front of you right now.
Thank you. And I just want to quickly add my comments to this. I think it has been said that this has been a long time coming. And I know I've been one of the people who've had even conversations with you about it. So I am so glad to see that it's finally here and to come into fruition, and to know that when there's businesses interested, as we know that there are many, especially in the space we're in today, they have a baseline to look at, and to know where at least we can start, and that be a door open for them to feel a way about our community and be interested in us. Thank you.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Let me see if I understand this right. In order for someone to qualify, they have to put $250,000 in new investment. It's not if they buy a $250,000 building and then move into it without doing improvements.
If they buy, well, no, it has to be improvements to the building, yes.
Okay, so it's after the initial purchase price.
Yes, because the abatement itself goes only on increment. So it's not like if there's an existing building that's already on the tax rolls, this is only on value added to it. So if they add to it, that's what they're getting abated.
Yeah.
They don't get anything abated for what's already existing.
Right, that's in the growth and the equalized assessed value. So as they invest in the building and the value grows, that's what the increment is based on.
Sure, but if they buy a $250,000 building and the property tax goes up, they would qualify just by buying something of that price, and it goes up, whatever it goes up.
No.
I don't think so. No, they have to invest in the building.
Additional?
Yeah. So it's like whenever they get their building permits, it shows, and anytime somebody gets a building permit and they do a deal inside the enterprise zone, they show what the value added to it was, not that they bought the building. 'Cause
Okay.
in theory, it probably wouldn't go up.
Well,
There wouldn't be any
lots of
increment.
people, whenever they buy a new home, then it gets reassessed.
True.
So that reassessment amount, if you don't do anything, does that qualify you?
No, it has to be improvements to the building.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it just says improvements.
Because my concern was something you said, whenever we were emailing, was that just normal real estate sales office qualifies for this. Which I don't quite understand the logic as to why that was in there, but like you say, that was done a while ago. And
It's just the NAICS definition of real estate, if you look up the NAICS codes, because that's, when it comes to industry, that's what we're going on. So, just
Yeah.
anything that says real estate and NAICS would qualify. I don't know why that's there.
yeah, so hopefully that can, it's a document that's going to be a living document, I guess. The other piece I'd like to see, this still allows for Bloomington and Normal to give over and above this, so we still have that ability to compete. At some point, I would like this council to give you something that says, we won't compete with Bloomington. That way, when people come to you, we're not competing with Bloomington. You, as the person bringing these folks in, they can go wherever it fits them best, not whoever's going to give them the best deal, because now we're fighting against each other.
I've seen that before outlined as an incentive policy, and that's where the councils all agree, like, here's as far as we would go for some of these. What this is doing is just setting up a baseline, but like I said earlier, there are mega deals floating around the country right now that would probably go above and beyond this, but I still don't know what everybody's limits are besides one-on-one conversations. So it'd be nice if there was a joint incentive policy.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're getting after.
I would add that there has been an informal agreement for years that we would not do that, that businesses would go where they choose to go. And in the sense of manufacturing, like we're talking, or whatever the business is like that, a business that would qualify for these kind of incentives is going to benefit the community no matter where they are. I mean, the reach of that benefit is going to be throughout both communities. So, yeah, that's a point well taken. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. We have no public comment at the end of the meeting tonight, so before taking a motion for adjournment, are there comments and concerns? And Ms. Cummings, we'll start with you.
Yes, I actually have a couple things. August is pretty busy this time around. CDM has 2 events coming up, or one actually will be in September, which is the Playla. I got to make sure I say it right, which I'm so excited about, and it's a night for adults to play. So I hope you all attend that. August 14th we're bringing back the Medici Craft Beer and Jazz. Stop by and see me. I'll be volunteering somewhere. I'll be running around in a t-shirt. So come and say hi, but certainly come out and support. And last but not least, I'm saying this not so much as a council member, but actually as a resident of the area. Many of you who live within the One Normal Plaza probably received, and I'm showing it for the video tonight, in case you're watching, your card from the Planning Commission. And I just ask that you remember, it tells you exactly what the meeting is about. It's actually about rezoning, and it's that the fact that the area will be subdivided into 4 different zoning areas within one area. Despite other things that you've been told or have heard, that is not what we're discussing. We're discussing the subdivision, or subdividing, I should say, of that current area to have 4 different, if I'm not mistaken, 4 different zoning codes within it that does not exist today. That is the conversation. That is what will be presented. And eventually, after taking this step, at some point thereafter, it will come to council. So please be open and be mindful of what the actual issue at hand for the night is, and hope to see you there.
Mr. Nord, then Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I recently went out on a walk along some of the water drainage systems, so like the creeks and streams and stuff like that we have. I don't know if staff have done this or not, but during my walk, there are islands that have formed in places, where the water is going around and eroded out. Also going underneath some of the culverts where the bottoms are not concrete going to and from that culvert. There's quite a bit of silt that has built up. Some, it's like a foot deep. So we just had this big storm. I'm not a water engineer, but just common sense would say that would inhibit water flow going through there. And in that section that we just had redone there between College and Blair, that was just done here this past year, or this year, and there's some erosion that has started there. So the reason I'm telling the council this is because we may have some expenses coming in to fix this whole area, and we need to look at it. So my request is that we look at it and see if we can address it before it becomes a problem. Then my second comment is something that came out for bid here this past week, I believe. I subscribe to all the bid documents that are the bid notifications that the town sends out. So the West College water extension went out for bid, and when Ms. Smith and I were in talking with Mr. Burkhart about some water issues, he showed us those maps. And I just want council to be aware that going along West College, we're putting this water main on there on the north side of College Avenue, which is what we all know about. Now, currently on the north side and south side of College, Bloomington has fire hydrants. So when you drive down that road, you'll see yellow fire hydrants signifying Bloomington's fire hydrants. When we put our water main to the north, we are also putting fire hydrants. Bloomington's are remaining. So when our taxpayers, constituents drive down that road, they'll see on the right side, Bloomington fire hydrant, normal fire hydrant, Bloomington, normal, close together. And on the other side of the road, it'll be littered with Bloomington's existing fire hydrants too. So I expect people will call and say, hey, this is a waste of taxpayer money, community resources. I'm not one to compete with Bloomington. And this just seems like we're competing. We're spending more than we need for the infrastructure that's there. We should not have that many fire hydrants right next to each other on the same side of the road. So I see that as a future problem. And the reason I bring it up now is because we've had previous council members say that the town doesn't spend money unless they intend to do something. Well, these plans were drawn, so we intend to put fire hydrants right next to Bloomington fire hydrants on the north side of the road. And I just don't agree with that. But thank you, and good night.
Ms. Smith?
Just to follow up on Mr. Nord's discussion, I do want to make viewers aware that he and I did look at some water main that was taken out in a council previously approved action, and there will be a video that the town has created to document that discussion. And so if you want a more comprehensive discussion of what is happening on a previously approved water project, as soon as it gets closed captioned to make it accessible to everyone, that will be loaded to the town's, is it the Facebook page? I'm getting a head shake. And then in terms of the duplication, the project that was approved on the west side is within normal city limits. And what I originally wanted to speak about is some very exciting news for our disability children and their parents. I received this in an email from the state that Governor Pritzker signed HB 40 and HB 2748 into law, allowing special education students to continue attending school through the end of the school year in which they turn 22, instead of having to stop abruptly whenever their birthday hits. The package also is making a special provision for this coming academic year for special needs students who recently turned 22 and were impacted by the COVID-19 to remain eligible for educational services up to the end of the regular 2021 and 22 school year. So I attempted to reach Unit 5 to see what they could communicate, and I could share with you about how to get in touch with them. I hadn't heard back by the time of this meeting, so I would encourage you to call the district offices. If you're wanting more information. I'm assuming if you have a child that's 21 this year and about to turn 22, you'll begin the school year and you'll be pleasantly, overwhelmingly pleased that your child will not have to stop abruptly, and in some cases, parents having to retire because they don't have caregivers for their children that are no longer in instructional program. But I wanted to make sure the word got out that that law was passed, and I'm so thankful.
Motion,
Mayor, if I
Go
could
right
make
ahead.
just a couple of quick comments, follow-up comments to some of the statements. In regard to the One Normal Plaza PUD amendment process that Ms. Cummings discussed, that meeting is 5 o'clock on Thursday this week, which is the August 5 in this room before the Planning Commission. Mr. Nord, your comments about the creek right-of-way and the condition of the creek and the assessment that is ongoing year after year. And so stay tuned, because this fall, actually in early December, when we review the Community Investment Program, the CIP, that will include stormwater projects. Every year, we go over and prioritize stormwater projects, so that is on our plate. And then West College Avenue, As Mr. Nord indicated, that project is currently out for bid. The water main extension, this is a project we've talked about for about a year now because we did the study first on the water main extension. Council approved phase 1 at your last meeting, and the phase 2 extension, the bids will be coming to you likely your next meeting. So we're excited to get that that water main looped, as we've discussed a number of times. So thank you.
Motion for adjournment.
So, second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, we are adjourned.
No, you are. You said you'd do it. My makeup won't hold up that long.